Hi, welcome to our Mental Health First Aid at Work monthly webinar. Today's topic is mental health barriers in the workplace. My name is Jennifer Cox, and I'm going to be your moderator and host for our time together today. As people slowly roll in to the space with us, we started a moment a little early, but here we are again. We're recording it for everyone. We have some panelists here to join us today from some of our partner organizations that we have worked with Mental Health First Aid to support their well-being initiatives in each of their respective organizations. It's been a beautiful journey with each of these partnership organizations, and we're very excited for you to have the time to hear some of the insights that they can share with us. World Mental Health Day is on October 10th, and we wanted to start the month off with just generating some conversations, some insights, and a little bit of excitement around the topic, because to be honest, I hope our conversations are not just happening on one day out of the month in October, but that they're happening every day and across the course of our year. Mental well-being is so important to each and every single one of us. Our organizations are impacted in different ways. We each have different ways of approaching that, if we even have initiatives in that regard. We're here to help you with that. We're here to give you inspiration, insights, strategies, the things that work, the things that didn't work, and hopefully some supports that we can offer you from the National Council for Mental Wellbeing and Mental Health First Aid at Work to move whatever it is that you're doing or wherever you're at in that journey, to move it in a nice forward and healthy progression. So as we get started today, a couple things. Number one, as you log in, if you don't mind, in the chat box, if you could put your name, the organization you're representing that you're here with, and maybe your favorite fall activity. Mine happens to be going out and seeing the colors that nature shares with us, the display and the painting that she shares across our forests and our trees. It's just beautiful. It's my favorite thing to do, is to go looking at our forests and trees. So put in the things that you like to do here for fall. Another thing I want to share is that not only are we using chat to talk back and forth throughout our conversation today, but we will be using the Q&A. So if you have a conversation or a question that comes up as any of our panelists are talking and you want to ask it, please put it in the Q&A so we can keep track of those. We'll let you know if it's going to be something we're going to cover, or if it's something we'll directly attend to while we're talking or at the end of our session when we have time today. So thank you so much for using the chat to respond to who you are, where you are, and what your favorite fall activity is. But then the Q&A is specifically for those questions that jump out at you that you would love our panelists to answer as we move forward. So with that in mind, let's get started. Again, my name is Jen Cox. I'm the manager of our national trainers for Mental Health First Aid USA with all of our curriculums. And I'm delighted to be joined here with another colleague of mine, Jamie Chapman, who's going to be assisting me along with the team in the background to answer those questions and make sure we're lined up for the time that we have together. So thank you, Jamie, for the support in that. And again, feel free to use that Q&A throughout our time here together. In order to get to that, if you look at your toolbar on your Zoom panel, it's either at the top or at the bottom. You're going to be able to find that Q&A button up there. It looks like a little box with a Q in it. And then the chat is the little conversation bubble. So if you need any support with that, again, message us in the Q&A, and we can also help you if you have any technology issues. From there, it is my absolute and distinct pleasure to welcome our panelists that you see here on your screen today. And as each one of them talk, we'll try to pin them as well so that they can be highlighted. But as we talk about World Mental Health Day and the theme of workplace mental health, these individuals have been absolutely key in the implementation of their well-being strategies and initiatives through their organizations, and have been wonderful partners with us at the National Council throughout the years. So I'd very much like to introduce Taryn Bird. She is the Senior Director of Social Impact with Kate Spade New York. We also have Heidi Dara, who's Business Strategy Manager with the Mental Health Go-to-Market team for Kaiser Permanente. And then Fernando Lamas, who is the Wellbeing Manager for the Americas with the Lend-Lease Foundation. So I just want to take a chance. If any one of you, I guess we'll start, Heidi, or if you'd like to start, just to say hello and introduce yourself as well.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks for the introduction. And I am scanning. I'm so excited about fall. I'm an original Midwesterner, transplant to Southern California. So I'm like all the leaves and the outdoors. I'm feeling a little jealous. But yeah, I have been with Kaiser Permanente since about 2016. And our mental health go-to-market team sits in the area of strategic customer engagement. So a lot of the work that we do is with our different employer groups who are customers of Kaiser Permanente to help them really evolve their presence in this space of mental well-being for their employees. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Heidi. Thank you so much. How about Fernando? Would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, yes, Jen. Thank you so much. I'm Fernando Llamas. I'm the Wellbeing Manager for the Americas for the Lend-Lease Foundation. Lend-Lease is actually a large-scale builder-developer, and we have sites all over the globe. And for us, it's really, really important to think about our employees, how they show up to work, not just for the obvious risk factors, but we also love to take care of our folks' mental well-being and just who they are and how they show up to work every day. Um, Autumn activity. I am a SoCal native, so I'm just going to be sipping on pumpkin anything these days. Yeah.
We'll take that. That's right. Pumpkin anything. I'm sure you have a lot of people that will join you in that sentiment. Thanks, Fernando. Glad you're here. Taryn, how about you?
Sure. Thanks, Jen, and thanks to the Mental Health First Aid team for hosting this event. In anticipation of World Mental Health Day, I have to say, as like a mental health advocate and working in this space, I greatly appreciated that we were doing this on October 1st and not October 10th. So thank you for that. My name is Taryn Bird. I lead social impact at Kate Spade, New York. I've been here about 11 years. And our social impact work at Kate Spade is really grounded in cultivating good mental health for women and girls when we invest in that issue in communities and places where we operate outside of the company, as well as we have a saying about, really working to help our outsides match our insides. And so we also have a portfolio of work that my team leads that is focusing on cultivating good mental health inside of the workplace. And the National Council for Mental Wellbeing was actually one of our first partners when we started doing this work much more intentionally. And I'm really happy to be here today to talk about this issue. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Taryn. Thanks to all three of you. And to those of us that are logging in and listening, the fact that we have such diversity, even just in three people in the panel of the communities that they touch, the work that they do, you're going to be able to see the uniqueness of the conversation we're going to have today. And again, so grateful. And Taryn, I'm with you. I'm glad we're doing this on the 1st, not the 10th. It's a busy month. So let's go ahead and jump right in and just have a few questions. Heidi, we're going to start with you, and then Fernando and Taryn, if you'd like to answer after that, we definitely welcome your responses as well. But the first thing that I know a lot of our listeners or participants here are thinking about is, how can companies balance this need for productivity that we all do? I mean, it's work, right? With the need to support our employee mental health. Can you tell us a little bit that how you all do that or foster that at Kaiser Permanente?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll kind of talk about it a little bit from a broader perspective, including Kaiser Permanente, but working across with the different employer groups that we work with, we see an array of different circumstances. So I think the biggest thing is to really dispel that myth that these are on opposing sides, productivity or supporting mental health. The research really shows that workplaces that do promote good mental health and support individuals who are maybe battling a mental illness or mental health conditions, it actually leads to decreased absenteeism, increased productivity, right? So it really makes good business sense. And I think the other side of this in the balancing productivity is really concentrating on that prevention and early intervention space. We like to talk about that quite a bit. The concept of mental fitness that we've really been rolling out, having these conversations where just like when you go to the gym, you do things for your mental health as well. I'd be on my soapbox forever, so I'm going to try and keep my answers brief. But I think that part, when we talk about productivity, really you look at decreased overall utilization of mental health care, all of those sorts of things that go into it. So it just kind of makes good business sense on that productivity side to support your employees' mental health.
Yeah, Heidi, thank you so much for highlighting that. Fernando or Taryn, any other insights you'd like to share in this regard?
I can jump in here. So for our organization, obviously we're builders, and from the forefront, we're always thinking about how we're doing things according to policy, safety procedures, whether that be OSHA and such. And so productivity is always front of mind for us. Staying on a schedule is super, super important. But one of the things that we really conceived very early on is what we call our global minimum requirements. And that's really thinking about how we operate safely. And that's beyond hard hats and steel-toe boots and such. We really want to think about operating safely on a psychological level as well. We want to make sure that everyone is showing up to work and is present for the work that they are performing. So really reinforcing that, not just training folks on those OSHA rules or what other local regulations they might be. It's also about implementing internal processes that support that structure as well, and actually make employees feel like they are part of how they are showing up to work and the productivity that they are outputting on a daily basis for us as well.
Yeah, it's a big part of safety, right? Safety is quite
Exactly.
a larger umbrella. Thanks, Fernando. Taryn, did you want to step in with this one?
Fernando, I love that you brought up psychological safety. You know, I think for like we're Kate Spade New York, we're a global lifestyle brand. You probably know us for our handbags. And you know, a lot of I think when people hear the word mental health, a lot of times there's automatically an association with mental illness. And a really important part, I think, of doing this work from an employee perspective is also socializing the language that isn't so that is very warm and very inviting, you know. And so as we're thinking about our work in the workplace, you know, I think, and I just want to give a lot of credit to Mental Health First Aid for this and equipping us and our teams with the language to be able to have that conversation. Because I do think, and to Heidi's point, even about productivity, you know, anytime that you're not addressing something really directly, like there's a lot of spin that can happen, right? Without just being able to directly address something in a warm and caring way. And so I do think that like that psychological safety and productivity, you know, the one piece are just so, they're really these, these really, quite frankly, like beautiful outputs and outcomes from doing this type of work inside of the workplace. I think the other piece, I know, you know, managers have a really, really big impact on their employees' lives and how they feel and how they show up in the world. And I think that perspective of sharing with managers, like you have the opportunity to really positively impact somebody's life on a day-to-day basis versus only seeing it through the lens of work output. You know, and I think that that's something too that's really important to reinforce is that we're spending so much of our time, our energy, you know, whether it's in a corporate environment or in a retail environment for us. But what a beautiful opportunity to also see how you can bring your purpose into the world to positively impact somebody's life. And so that's definitely a lens through which we look at our work in the mental health space as well.
Yeah, thank you, Taryn, and thank you all for the responses to that. And it really leads us into our next question. Fernando, I'm going to ask you to start with it, but how can organizations involve the employees in shaping these mental health initiatives? We've all talked about their value and how we're recognizing who our people are that do the work for us, but how can we involve our employees in shaping our mental health initiatives so that we ensure that we actually meet their needs versus what we think might be something important for us? So how have you seen that happen?
You know, Jen, that's a really, really great question because I think at the forefront, oftentimes we think that mental health is one portion of the organization's responsibility, whether it be us who are here on this panel who are leading the mental health efforts, you on the outside who are bringing in these mental health capabilities that are going to help us in the workplace, leadership. I mean, it could be like a hot potato that people toss around and think, well, you know, I'm busy doing this. We just spoke about productivity. People are often so focused on their jobs that they think that that might be somebody else's job. But the truth of the matter is that, you know, mental health is really all of our responsibilities because we all own our own mental health. And then indirectly, we sort of own the mental health of those around us due to the impact that we have on others and others have on us. So one of the great things that I have found, and I'm going to start off by tooting your horn, is lining up with organizations that can certify folks and make them feel like they are capable to have these types of conversations in the workplace, understand the parameters around having these conversations in the workplace. But I think also just reducing the stigma around being able to have these conversations in the workplace is super, super important. Now, at the employee level, you can do things like creating volunteer networks. That's really, really wonderful way of making sure that you have champions in that space. That might look like designated folks who might be a mental health first aider who either have a sticker or a signature line or something that identifies them in the workforce, similar to something that you would do in case of a fire emergency and you have your fire warden or such, or someone who's a CPR specialist. Now, these aren't folks that are going to be, therapists or mental health experts per se, but these are folks that have raised their hands and said, I'm willing to take on these extra, responsibilities because I care enough about my team, the mental health of my team, but also my own mental health, to be able to learn a little bit more about what that means and what those dynamics look like in the workplace. So I think giving employees ownership of these types of programs, having them participate, making them feel like the participation is part of their work experience and adds to the work experience can be really, really positive overall, not just for the individuals involved, but for the organization as a whole.
Yeah, powerful. Thank you, Fernando, for that. Heidi or Taryn, would you like to add anything in regards to your perspectives?
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I love just talking about everyone might think it's someone else that can help. And coming from the healthcare perspective of our organization, we have a real mix of different employees, right? We have a number of people who've been trained to spot for signs. They've been clinically trained. And so sometimes I think that happens quite frequently across organizations. Like, well, that's maybe not my role. There's probably someone more qualified. And to your point, I think mental health first aid and some of these different programs that really educate all of us, educate on how to approach the conversation without diagnosing, without, those sorts of things, but really being able to be involved. And one example I'll throw out there that we do on our side, we have they call it the Mindful Hub. So on employees on a volunteer basis are part of this group that they do regular, I think almost every day of the week, there's a mindfulness activity, a meditation, an educational piece surrounding mental health. And again, all volunteers coming in to kind of build that community where it's a support, as your peer support's always going to be the most frequently used, right? So building those, to your point, Fernando, that you're identifying kind of who that is that's raising their hand, I think is really, really helpful. So folks know who to go to.
Yeah, thanks for that, Heidi. Incredibly important. Taryn, did you want to jump in?
I think that the piece that I'll add that we've done here at Kate Spade, we do have, similar to what Fernando you were mentioning, like an employee resource group. We call it Mind, Body, Soul. It's a group of Kate Spaders who are passionate, invested, and are really our mental health advocates. A lot of them are also trained in mental health first aid. I'm one of them. But I think a piece too sometimes that we overlook in some our interventions, because obviously we also we need the very formulaic and widespread interventions that working with an organization like a mental health first aid allow us as a fashion brand to roll out a very not only authentic but credible program. I think the other piece though that is just so important, and I think this is more for managers, is just to remind our people managers that gratitude goes such a long way. Recognition goes a really long way. And I do think that continues to be something that is really, really important. I mean, we're talking about fall, we're coming up in the United States on Thanksgiving, a time that we're really spending. Gratitude tends to be, talked about a lot. And I do think that, given the really dynamic economic climate that we're in right now, that, it's important to reiterate gratitude to teams. And it's, whether that's a handwritten note, whether that's a verbal, whether that's an email, whether that's a, hey, I saw you in that meeting, you did a great job. It's really important to also model that versus mirror what we might be seeing in super efficient, high productivity environments. So I do think that those kind of those very grassroots initiatives, it's important for us not to overlook the effectiveness of that and continuing to, create psychological safety amongst team members, but I think especially cross-functionally, those people that maybe you're not working with as much on a day-to-day level, but you need their partnership in order, to achieve the goals or results that you're looking to do. So I think that that's also something that's important, the grassroots stuff, that we as the private sector, sometimes I think we need those strategies, we're super effective executors, and that the grassroots piece I think is equally as important.
Absolutely, Taryn. And you brought up, talking about the productivity and the impact that this has. And we focused on our employees and how we bring them into the initiatives and the conversation. It leads me to kind of look at the other side, which I'm sure some people are thinking, and I've seen a couple questions with is, but what about the barriers, right? We all have this image that, oh, everybody's going to be a part of this and this is going to be simple, but there are barriers. So Fernando, since I started with you and you talked about how we bring the employee voices into the engagement, what are the barriers that you've come up against? And this will be for everyone, but Fernando, if you can start about what are the barriers that we have or what employees are facing in the workplace that maybe limit this dream and these aspirations and this work that we're doing?
That's actually probably the reason a lot of us are here, thinking about those barriers. I think a lot of us that have shown up on this call are proponents of mental health or at least curious about it and having that be adopted in the workplace. But what are, those barriers are always kind of what we're working against. And those can line up, whether it be within the organization, society at large. I think earlier one of the other panelists also just mentioned a lot of the issues that are taking place in society right now, whether it be economic, political, socio issues that are taking place. But I will focus in a little bit on our industry. We are a builder developer, and by nature, just due to the nature of the work, we tend to attract mostly masculine identifying individuals to work for us. These are construction sites, typically heavy duty work and such. So one of our barriers really tends to revolve around stigma and shame. Oftentimes, folks are not perhaps as compelled to bring those types of things to work or bring them up at work because they feel that it might challenge the type of work that they do. You might be on a rig and here you are hoisting tons of material, and then you might be panicking on the inside for whatever reason. You might be having an issue at home. You might be struggling through something, or someone in your family might be going through something, and that might be taking up your mental bandwidth at the same time. But oftentimes I think folks can feel like this type of stigma can lead to not being included, being overlooked for things like promotions or raises, or just not being socialized with the rest of the group the same, because suddenly you're the person who, I hate to say it, but sometimes becomes like a squeaky wheel. But I will say my personal philosophy is that those squeaky wheels are usually the ones where you need to kind of come in and give that attention to. They're usually your canaries in the gold in the mine. You want to be able to identify what even these small issues that can then become amplified and begin to fester, or no, I would say, begin to influence other parts of the team or the group dynamic. So really being able to be aware of what those barriers are, but then actually being able to identify those barriers and coming in and beginning to honestly address them. And I think it begins with honest conversation. I think it begins with lining up with organizations like the National Council to bring in to maybe facilitate that. So it feels like there's a third objective party that's coming in. So it's not employer versus employee. Things like that can really help overcome some of those barriers.
Yeah, thanks, Fernando. And you just supported what Heidi mentioned before about that prevention and early intervention, right? Of noticing the things now so they don't become, so loud, or the voices in the squeaky wheel. Heidi, I saw you just unmuted. Do you like to respond as well about barriers?
Yeah, happy to. And I love, just so well said, with just the stigma, and especially recognizing different industries are going to be a completely different sometimes, right? So I think we work with that a lot across when we're working with different employer groups. We don't have a cookie cutter solution for every employer group. There really are a lot of differences. Like you said, your industry, we see it a lot with first responders. We see it, across that. But the one thing that really hit for me, Fernando, was just talking about kind of at home, like we're not here in a vacuum in our workplace. And I heard, I'm going to really misquote it, so someone can correct me, but there's some great new research happening in the workplace where if someone in your home is experiencing mental health issues, or an illness or physical illness, what percentage more likely you are as an employee maybe to get hurt at work because you're distracted, or you might something like that, or vice versa. If you as the employer are struggling, how much more likely someone else in the home is to then possibly get even physically injured, or, have mental health issues. So I think I love that you touched on that, because I think that's a big part, is employers recognizing, yeah, everyone's walking in with something too, right? We all have these socioeconomic things that are very unique to us as individuals. Again, I would talk about this all day, but thank you. I love that you brought up those points.
Yeah, we are more than just the jobs that we do, aren't we? And the impact. Taryn, did you want to share anything or barriers?
I think Fernando and yeah. Yeah,
Awesome.
well, actually, let me add one to it, actually, that's retail specific, because I do, being the retailer here, I think a big barrier, and I'll speak specifically to, we have a fleet of stores in North America and around the world. And when we talk about this work, for us, it's similar, Fernando, to what you were speaking to when you were talking about teams being on rigs or on sites. We have storefronts. And when we first rolled out mental health first aid, which we did a few years ago, and there's about 130 of us at our corporate teams that are certified mental health first aiders. We needed something that was also, that's about a 6-hour training. We also needed something that was a bit more concise, and that was very specific for the experiences of a retail employee. And so that was definitely a barrier to roll that program out more broadly at the store level. And so we were really excited when the National Council rolled out earlier this year, the mental health first aid for retail. The 2-hour program that's self-paced, you're able to go at it at your leisure when you're taking a break. And all of the scenarios are also very much through the lens of the experience of being a retail associate. And so that was definitely something that we were really, really excited about. And as of today, we have about over 500 of our field leaders that are trained in mental health first aid for retail. And that's definitely been a really great tool to add to the toolbox that's sector specific, that's time sensitive, that really meets the needs of the population of employees that is engaging with it. So that was a really exciting opportunity to be a part of, and we were really happy that came forward.
Yeah, thanks, Taryn. And the work that we did with you helped inform, right? And to fine tune that program specifically for your industry. As all of you bring this up, we talk about barriers. We had a question in the Q&A that asked about, we've had a lot of transitions. Some of the organizations on this call are very small, some are very large, and you all from pretty significantly large, right, organizations, but some of our workforce aren't in stores and they're not on site on rigs or what have you. They're remote and they're in a different situation and environment. I know for us in regards to mental health first aid, we look at that, especially in the conversations and the training and the literacy to say, so how do we do that in these squares, right, when we see each other versus in person walking down the hallway and noticing things differently. That is a barrier. Have you all seen that as a barrier? Whether we're together in person, whether we have this remote capacity, and if there's any insight, one or two of you can give into how do you engage folks then, knowing that we're in a different environment versus our standard everyday office kind of work, which I know Fernando mentioned, but anyone want to tackle that one? Heidi?
I'm happy to chime in a little bit. It was kind of like my overlying thought process. And I promise I don't know Blair, but I see in the chat, Blair has this great comment about just we can't always come into work at 100%, but being comfortable enough to say, hey, I'm not okay 100% today. We've seen that a lot in the I work remotely. A lot of us work remotely, our non-clinical folks. And I think that's a big part of it. You need to be able to say it. That culture needs to be built because we don't cross paths on the way to the restroom or that kind of stuff anymore. And really being able to build that up. You hear all the time, we get on calls now and it's kind of our reality where people will be kind of caught. They're like, oh, I kind of am getting over COVID. I'm getting over the flu. And in our virtual world, we're able to normalize that. And being able to normalize, again, thanks Blair for writing the script for us, but because that was the perfect comment, us being able to normalize saying, I'm not 100% mentally, emotionally, whatever, whatever words you want to use right now, and that being okay. And, I think in the same way that a physical illness is approached, that makes sense.
Thank you for that. Yeah, definitely wonderful insights here. And thank you, everybody. Keep the questions coming because as we move through ours that I have for the panelists, a lot of these are going to relate. So hopefully we'll answer them. If not, we'll take the time at the end. But thank you for that and support, Heidi. how can we, let's see, Taryn or Heidi, let's see, Taryn, how about if you want to start for us? How can organizations create a culture? You all at Kate Spade New York have done a tremendous amount of work over the past few years of creating a culture amongst you all in multiple levels, right, within your organization. But how do we create that culture that supports well-being and reduces the stigma we've all talked about that comes with mental health challenges? How can you respond to that?
I think the way in which I can share how we've approached it, and I just want to say too that like we're not perfect. You know, we're very much still on this journey. And I think anytime that an organization says like we've got this figured out, like there's a lot of complexities, you know, to business and the workplace. And you know, I think two things that really come to mind when you ask that question, Jen, are the first of which I think a warm environment is really important. I think that's really important for this topic. You know, there's a wide variety of people with different cultural backgrounds, and had different experiences with mental health growing up, or didn't have certain experiences with mental health growing up. And so I think that warmth is really important. And so specifically, I feel like what that looks like is having managers that model and don't mirror, that model that type of language. You know, you can sit in as many trainings as you want, but if it's not embodied within the day-to-day interactions of your employees, or at least, you know, a portion of those interactions, like you're checking the box versus really starting to embed it within your organization. And I can say, you know, that's something I know my colleague, she's sitting right across from me right now. I can see her, but you know, it's something that us as a team, you know, we really had to start with each other. You know, like we really needed to experience what that conversation was like with each other. And I live with complex post-traumatic stress. It's something that my team is very aware of. It's something that I talk about. I learned the language of I live with, I don't suffer from you guys, you know, like that was something that like, I think is really important for us to also, you know, modeling that and not mirroring what we see. So I think that that's one part is like, and the second part, that warmth, but alongside is like, you know, to not allow ourselves to be halted by, you know, we have to get this perfect. You know, progress is halted by perfectionism, and that leads to paralysis. And then we're not making any impact on well-being. No impact is too small. Full stop.
Yeah.
Full stop. Like, and so I think like that is, you know, one of the phrases that I've always heard here at this brand that I've just loved is the concept of being perfectly imperfect. And I think that that's something that is really important to this work, because if we, you know, if we don't keep taking the next step to push it forward, or maybe reassess or say, hey, you know, like, this happened, so we're going to need to rethink what we do in Q3 and Q4. You know, we're going to relook at this, like, and really making sure that it's an active part of the culture discussion, like that it's not just a, hey, we did this training, here's the stamp, like, see you later. You know, like, I think that that's something that's really important. And I will say, you know, here at Kate Spade, where our parent company is a company called Tapestry, they've also started doing mental health first aid, you know, so like we started smaller and it grew over time. So like that piece too of just like not to get halted by this sense of it has to be perfect before either we talk about it or that we're striving towards, you know, I think is something that's so incredibly important. And those would be two things I think that we've continually put at the forefront. And the third thing would just be like, it evolves, you know, and to not look at it as a static strategy. It has to actually be, especially in a business environment, it has to be very active. Yeah.
Thank you, Taryn, and thanks for your vulnerability with all of us, right, on this call to do what you were just talking about in regards to the modeling and speaking and living the practices that were there. Heidi, I know this is really an important element for you all as well, and for you personally, but as well as the organization. What do you think organizations can do?
Yeah, I'm just working on my resume to go work for Taryn right now, because I am like all in on her style, because this is amazing. So thank you. It's just it really was awesome. And I just want to echo that, just being really authentic in our efforts as leaders. You know, you can't tick the box, and kind of having it as part of your overall inclusivity strategy. Anything in the DEI space really is connected directly with anything you're doing in this mental well-being space. So, again, I would just echo that. There's a lot of tactical things that we work with in employer groups, and happy to share with anyone else just as far as what that looks like on paper. And because sometimes I love the overall warmth and the overall inclusiveness of the environment. And then kind of on top of that, you're able to add like, here's what our maybe EAP looks like. If you're connected with an EAP, here's what our policies look like that are supporting like the walk part, because people will have suspicions, you know, just to like, is this real? Is this what's happening here? So I think those things are just like twofold in making it work in the workplace.
Yeah, thanks for that, Heidi. And Fernando, I know that you probably have some insights as well. If you want to take a minute to share in regards to this, how we support the culture of well-being. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I think both Tara and Heidi have hit the nail on the head. You definitely want to have sort of that warm environment. Absolutely, that's super important. Activating your providers. So, if that's your EAP or other resources that you might have within the organization that employees might not be aware about, I think it's important to create that awareness that they can also seek out help if they need it through your benefits providers or your EAP and such. I will try to give maybe some practical approaches to it that I think oftentimes when we talk about these conversations, due to the fact that organizations have very like rigid sort of structures at times or budgets and things like that, first things I would say is really think about funding initiatives around this. The way we think about work, really, the employee will always think about why they're there, and it's really to make a living, to support themselves, support their families. And if they see that an organization is invested, literally investing funds, whether it be to programming, training, socializing things that can provide and create that culture, it'll begin to reinforce that they are a culture where you can come in and begin to share more about yourself, more about your mental health journey, and even build a mental health journey together. As important as individuals are to their everyday roles, that team dynamic can really influence them. One thing that I would add as well is, to make it part of your policies and procedures as to how you approach discussions around mental health. So really thinking about well-being conversations, thinking about seminars that, really can help folks understand. I think Taryn pointed out, understanding how to convey these thoughts in the workplace and not just talk negatively about them as in suffering or victim or, being negatively impacted, but really giving them a vernacular to understand how to be able to express themselves safely and still professionally in the workplace, I think are super important. I know it can be really taboo, especially right now with organizations facing potential windfalls when it comes to, profits and the economy being a little bit, difficult, precarious to navigate these days. But a small investment can go in a very, very beneficial direction for organizations that are invested in the mental health of their employees.
Yeah, that investment. Thanks, Fernando. Thanks to all of you for that. And you each kind of answered the last question I had is, what is the value of training your organization, right? Your members, your leadership, your frontline staff in these conversations. In just a moment, Jonathan Grau, who is a part of our mental health first aid team, is going to tell us what mental health first aid is. But before we do that, just a simple thought, if you could give to our listeners here, is, what's the biggest value have you found? How important is mental health training for managers, for professionals, for anyone in your organization? If you can just give us a quick statement on that. How important is that before we tell them what options we have to support? You want to start, Taryn?
I can start. I think two things that initially come to mind. I think, the first of which is that we've heard time over time again in these trainings that this is not just content for the workplace, but that's actually taken home. So the ripple effect of this type of training is actually something we can't, I wish there was a way to measure that, but like what I hear time and time again is like, oh, this helped me bridge a conversation with my sister. Or, like I was noticing this in my younger cousins, so I said something. Like we often hear kind of those ripple effects of doing this type of work in the workplace, and how that then extends beyond the walls of a Kate Spade office or a Kate Spade store, you know? So I think that that's one piece. I think, you know, the second piece for us, that's something that's really important. And I appreciate, Ruth, that your question in the chat, you know, we started our work in the mental health space in 2013. And when we lost our founder to death by suicide in 2018. And that's really when, while we were investing in this issue in communities, particularly we started this work in East Africa and then made some investments stateside. When Kate passed was when we actually launched what we call Mind, Body, Soul, which is an internal expression of this work at the brand. And so what is really important for us, and I think, you know, companies that are going to champion societal issues is that there is kind of that 360 approach where you're looking at all the places that you can start to, you know, cultivate a authentic expression of this work beyond your philanthropic investments. And so that's something that is incredibly important for us. And, you know, that continues to be a part of our approach is that, you know, we're a very, I would say, we're a very committed funder to women's mental health and have been for the last 11 years. But in order to continue to do that work, it's also really important that we do that from an internal perspective, you know, like, and even to extend beyond that, then you start to talk about supply chain and you start to talk about, you know, there's lots of different areas that this work can come to life. And so I do think that continues to be something that's very important for us. And again, we're on a journey. We don't have this like totally, I would say, perfect or figured out, but like we're continuing to take those steps forward. And so that continues to be something that's really important for us at Kate Spade.
Yeah, thank you, Taryn. So very important insights. Heidi, what's the value of mental health training for you all? And Fernando as well.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that. And I love just the continued humility surrounding it. We are all on this journey, and coming from an organization where we provide mental health care, it's really, it's a walk the walk type of situation, right? I mean, we can't be out there saying to the world, this is what we believe in if we're not doing it internally. So just for the sake of time, I'll just land on one kind of business reflective point surrounding the importance of this training. I think it's over 90, it's like 92-ish% of potential employees are saying like it's important to them that an organization respects their psychological safety, their mental well-being. So when organizations are looking to recruit, retain people who are creating this healthy environment and who they think it's also important to them, it's really necessary to be able to support our employees where they're coming from and what they're looking for in an employer. So we have really been having a lot of those conversations because I think leaders, they want to do the right thing. They want to do morally, ethically. These are good humans, you know, most of them. I don't know all of them, but most of them are good humans. They want to do the right thing. But you also need to be able to make the business case for why you're doing this as well. So I think it's all there in one package, and this training is really crucial to that understanding.
Thanks so much, Heidi. Fernando, any last thoughts for this before Jonathan?
Yeah, I would add that as much as you're engaging your employees with this type of training, it's just as important to engage your leaders. It's very important for your leaders to understand what their employees are going to be exposed to, in the sense that, you know, this opens up broader conversations. I think it is also really important for organizations to start thinking about how we develop our staff from the get-go. I think oftentimes we either focus on very technical trainings or focused on very business-oriented development programs. But, you know, sinking in something like this, making suicide prevention, intervention training, making perhaps mental health first aid training integral part of your employee development is just as vital, I think, as anything else that you're going to be asking your employees to participate in. The last thing I would say is, you know, think about the humanity of your managers as well. You know, for better or for worse, now we've elevated these folks to a role where we're asking them to be in charge of not just the daily tasks that they have to do and the output of that work, but also what might be going on in the minds and the hearts and in the bodies of these individuals that we've entrusted them with. The research shows over and over again that most oftentimes employees leave their respective jobs due to their dynamics with their direct report manager. So if we're able to get those managers involved very early on in understanding these dynamics and saying, hey, we understand that we are asking you to meet this bottom line or these numbers, these tools will actually help you just as much as these other tools that we've granted you to get to that, perhaps even thrive and excel in achieving those goals. So I think engaging those managers and making that part of their vital, training and development is just as important as it is for the employees.
Yeah, absolutely, Fernando. Thank you for that. And what a beautiful transition to bring in Jonathan Grau. He is our Director of Client Development for Mental Health First Aid at Work, Mental Health First Aid USA. So Jonathan, if you don't mind letting people know kind of if they're curious, how just as the organizations and our individuals here have helped us, what is this Mental Health First Aid at Work that we're talking about and how can they get more information on it?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Before we do that, everybody hit your react button, please, and send Heidi, Fernando, and Taryn some internet love, please. I want to see it. Thank you. Yeah, this opportunity to gather together today, very rare because people like Fernando, Taryn, and Heidi are good people doing amazing things, and they are champions for this at their companies and in their communities and in their families, and we're so grateful that they joined us today. It's been a pleasure working with all of them over the years. And so now what I'd like to do briefly, so we can get back to Q&A, is talk about why we're here today. All of this boils down to a training program that the National Council administers and facilitates inside of organizations. So clearly the demand is there for employee engagement, for management upskilling, for HR benefits enablement. And now more than ever, it's up to us to understand why it's important to create a healthy, warm working environment, because we need to make sure that our employee population is engaged and that we're balancing accountability with empathy, and we're finding the best ways to achieve productivity and care for our employees and their families and their communities and make an impact socially. So mental health first aid at work is a great way to do that. As you can see, we work across industry sectors. Taryn talked about our retail product line. Fernando has talked about how we work inside of construction. And at Kaiser Permanente, we spent a number of years training nearly the entire administrative and marketing department, over 5,000 people. So we can work at scale, and we can work with a mindfulness and an approach that can really make change inside an organization. And primarily it's tackling stigma. And we know that stigma can really influence how workers think and feel about themselves, how they show up at work, and more importantly, how they use their benefits. Benefits like employee assistance programs that are fully paid for, that are often anonymous and free, need to be taken advantage of. And so many people are scared to reach out to seek the help that they may need. And it's because of discomfort. And it's also because of corporate culture from time to time. So mental health first aid at work trainings are designed for corporations and employers large and small. And not only private sector employers. I see Cass County, North Dakota on the call. I see King County, Washington on the call. We work with all types of employers, public and private sector. So please feel free to reach out, because this program is research informed. It's trusted by leading organizations, large and small. And as you can tell, we're now in an iteration of the training that can reach all employees, whether it's a small bite-sized intro to mental health and mental health first aid, or a full-blown curriculum that's delivered by our instructors to get people certified and get people organized around a first aider or champion or support network or ERG. We're here to help you with that. So Jen, what do we teach? We teach ALGEE. And so ALGEE is part of a global exercise. ALGEE is a mnemonic. It helps us remember the steps we can take, not necessarily in order, to assist someone who might be in distress or who might be generally in need based on our appreciation of signs and symptoms. And in the workplace, it's hugely important to understand what policies and procedures look like, what emergency response looks like, and certainly what culture looks like, and how we might learn to approach our colleagues wherever they're from, whatever language they speak, to help them find the care that they need. So we teach ALGEE, and you've heard all of the benefits today. Taryn, Fernando, Heidi, they are advocates for this, but they're telling the truth. The reality is that a simple training exercise can engage employees and can help the organization promote healthfulness, and feel empowered, take advantage of those benefits and those services and those clinical and medical benefits that might help them achieve a higher level of recovery or sensitivity to the issues that they're facing, and especially their families might be facing. And finally, this can be tackled directly as a mental health specific training program, or it can complement a wide range of learning and development exercises and benefits, whether you're in a health company like Heidi, or whether you're in a safety first organization like Fernando. There are lots of opportunities to plug this in, and we're grateful for the opportunity to do that. So thanks for joining us, and thanks again to our panelists.
And Jonathan, thank you for sharing that information as well. And we had a couple of questions in the Q&A too about, is it just one training, right? It's not just a single training. Here you go. Good luck to you. It's actually a suite of offerings, and that we look at. I mean, Taryn mentioned there's retail focus, there's manufacturing focus. We look at the nature of the industry and make sure that we're communicating in a way that resonates with all of you. And there's different ways of sharing this information and building that literacy and awareness across the organization. And of course, we're always happy to talk to you about that, and we'll have opportunities for that here at the end. So as we wrap up our day here together, we have a lot of questions in the chat box. If we can answer all of them, we will. If we can't, we'll make sure that we get those answers out to the collective. But I also want to put up here to let everyone know that if you do have even greater questions beyond what we have in here today in our time, scan the code that's on your screen. It's going to help get you started. It'll help get you connected, so that if you do have very specific questions or curiosities about really what would this look like for my organization, I'm not as large as, Lend-Lease or Kaiser Permanente, and what does this look like for me? Or maybe there's equal things. So I'm going to leave that up there for a moment. But I do want to talk one question as we wrap up here today. We talked about, sometimes it's the policies and procedures that hold us back, or the leadership isn't maybe not be on board. And we've had that a couple times in the conversation. Just any last thoughts or any key things that real quickly that any of you can share, or any one of us from Mental Health First Aid even on the call, is like, what happens when we're looking at our policies and procedures? Maybe this isn't a part of it, or we want to do different or better. Any suggestions here of how to get that activated from those of us that have done it here on the call to help people out? How do we get leadership to support, or what happens when we look at our policies and we're like, it's not there, but we want to do something with them? Any tips, thoughts on that?
I can jump in.
That's Taryn.
I think the first thing is to recognize, especially depending on the size of your organization, that that's a process, right? So that's not that's usually a process that will take time to get, your counterparts aligned and the right people at the table to implement that change. I think something that I've definitely always, I feel like the concept of staying optimistic and staying really connected to every little bit of change matters. You know, and like out the gate, you might not get the program that you had set out to get, like with all of the bells and whistles. And it's important to actually look at it as incremental steps that your organization can take. And so I think that's definitely something that we've layered on and we've learned. We've layered on and we've learned. We've layered on, we pulled that back, we added this, it's again, that like, I think that very active nature of looking at this work is really important, and to just to continue to stay committed like along the journey, because it is a journey. And you know, we're going on 11 years and we're still learning and evolving and changing. So like, I think that that's definitely something just to, you know, we have one of our values at Kate Spade is wonderfully determined.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something in this work, don't burn out, don't go too hard, too fast. Like that's definitely something that I think is important too, like to take care of yourself while you're doing this. Because you can burn too bright. And we need more mental health advocates in the workplace. So it's important to like keep that in mind, that you're taking care of yourself while you're doing this too.
Beautiful. Thank you, Taryn. And again, thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us here today. We are at our time. Thank you so much, Heidi, Fernando, Taryn. It's always wonderful to see you, but your insights have been just amazing today. And we hope that it sparked, answered some questions, but also inspired people to step into this conversation and these initiatives in a very brave way, and know that you do have support with the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, Mental Health First Aid at Work. We are so grateful for you all to be here, and don't forget to use those links and ask the questions. We're here to answer and we're here to support you. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful October. And we look forward to engaging with you all in the near future. By the way, this recording will go out to you, so you will have it available to anyone who registered for the webinar. So thanks again. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having
Take care.
us.
Bye.